Hello.
Hello, Andreas. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Andreas, I'm recording this. Is this all right?
That's fine, yes. It's so
So
nice
nice
to meet you.
to meet you too. So you're in Norway.
No, I was in Norway. I live in Berlin now, in Germany.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and how long have you been there?
It's a little bit more than 2 years now,
Yeah.
but I've lived in Norway for 16 years, where I had a major part of my dancing career.
Mm.
And then I moved back to Germany because I was looking for a new base as a choreographer, and it seemed to be the right place. And so
Ah, okay. Are you originally from Germany?
I am, yes, I am from a very small town called Halberstadt. It's near Magdeburg.
Yeah.
That's where I was born, and
Mm.
I studied dance in Dresden.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, and I
Dresden
danced.
is a, yeah, sorry.
No, and I danced at the Leipziger Ballet for 5 years before I went to Norway.
I see. So is where you grew up, is it near Dresden?
No, not so near. No, it's closer
Mm.
to Hanover. Like,
Oh,
yeah,
I see. Yeah.
it's in that part.
I have a very special connection with Dresden.
You do?
Yes, my father was born in Dresden.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and he lived there until the war. And after the war, they went to South Africa. But yes, my grandfather and grandmother, my grandfather had a business there. He
Mhm.
was a gardenerij, he had. And my grandmother had a florist.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I only went to Dresden once, and I actually had the opportunity to go to the house where my father lived, and I could stand in the bedroom that was his bedroom, and I thought that was so special. Yeah, that I could do that.
That
So,
is so special.
but tell me about your how did you start dancing? What was the motivation for you to start dancing?
Oh, yes, that was, well, it's not so strange because my mother was a ballet dancer and my dad was an opera singer. So I was born into the world of theater. I grew up in the theater. It was the only place where I could be myself and feel completely at ease with myself. So I always knew from when I when I I only remember theater. I always knew that I will end up doing something within that world. And dancing was not always on the foreground there. Like when I was very little, I danced a lot and I moved a lot at home, and I watched a lot of rehearsals in the ballet studio. But then from the age of 6, 7, it didn't interest me. Um, and then I was more interested in everything that happened backstage. And at the age of 11, I started singing in the children's choir. So there was a bit of singing going on. And only at the age of 13, 14, my interest returned to movement. And then it became quite obvious at the age of 15, 16 that I really had a need to do that. And so I went the
Which was
audition.
actually, it's actually uh, for a ballet dancer, uh, not a young age, 15 and 16, to then start thinking about that again.
Yeah, it's rather late, and I remember also that my mother wasn't so happy about the thought when I told her at the age of 15, I really want to become a ballet dancer, and she said,
Oh,
no, you
really?
will not do that because you're too old, and it's a hard job, and I know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about, and I kind of accepted it, and I thought, okay, then I will just do it for myself for fun, and I didn't take ballet classes. I just kind of tried to copy what I saw in the performances. It was very free with a friend of mine. We just improvised or tried to copy the steps that we saw on stage. So in a way, it was a very free approach to ballet.
Mm.
Um, and even when I went to the audition, I took the a book about ballet steps out of my mother's shelf, for the ride on the train, just to see, oh, what is the tendu, what is the jeté.
What? Amazing.
Crazy.
That's
But
amazing.
the school in Dresden, one of their focuses is on improvisation, and in the audition there was an improvisation task, and when we came to that point, of course, then I went 100% with everything that I did with my friend, and I think that was the reason why I got in, because I did all this technical stuff, I mean, in what shape ever,
Mm.
but they saw, okay, there's a desire to move, and
Potential, yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
and it was kind of an experiment, I think, also for my teacher at the time, because I had to do the education. At the time there was a 4-year education, but I joined in the middle of the first year, so I had 3.5 years only of education, and I had to catch up on a lot. So I had
Oh,
to
okay. Mm.
classes with the 8-year-olds in the morning, then with the 5th grade a boys class, and then in the evening I would have some private lessons every now and then, so because I had
Mm.
to catch up on a few years.
Yeah. And what did your mom say when you got into the school? Was she
Well,
happy?
no, I mean, both of my parents were shocked, that I took that step, and my mother, she confessed later that she thought I'd be back after half a year because I would realize how hard it is, but I didn't, and then of
Mm.
course she saw a progress, and the development, and then she realized, okay, that was the right thing, and of course now she's proud and all of that.
But this is such an unusual ballet story, because usually it's starting from a young age and going from a young age to ballet school or, vocational training. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, I mean, to be honest, it was a mixture of being quite naive about it,
Mm.
also having a strong sense of, at 16, you know maybe a little bit more what you want than at the age of 8 or 9.
Mm.
So the strong will, and also in my life, it was the first time that I felt like this is exactly what I need to do.
Mm.
So there was a very strong backbone that I just wanted to do it.
Mm.
And I think that was the key to, actually, one of my dear friends always says to me, because no one has anticipated that I had such a long dance career. And he always said, your career is built 80% on willpower.
Oh.
So, and in a way, it's true, because it was a very strong driving force.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Because I think sometimes it's just getting on with it, just not think too much. I think it's a good thing to be sometimes naive, because then you attempt things without caution, really, or without thinking, oh, it probably wouldn't work. And when you're in it, then you're in it, then you have to just get on with it and do it.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, there were the first lessons when I realized, okay, this is what it takes, or this is what
Yeah.
it is. Okay, here we go. But
Yeah. Yeah.
and I didn't come in with a lot of ambitions. I didn't have big ambitions in terms of I want to dance at that opera house one
Oh,
day.
yeah.
I
Mm.
had the only thing that mattered was I wanted to dance no matter where. But then after half a year, my teacher, he saw the progression, and he then encouraged me, and he said, if you continue working like this, you might actually be able to go to a very good company. And that was sort of the next um, important key moment for me to realize, okay, then I have to give it even more, because there is a possibility that I can actually end up further than I've ever thought of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's wonderful, really. But tell me, so where were you then when lockdown was announced in Berlin?
I just made it back the day before the first lockdown. This was actually quite exciting on many levels, because I had just come back from a tour of my production of Schubert's Winterreise in Pakistan, which was organized by the Goethe Institute in Pakistan. and we had 3 performances in 3 different cities within 5 days. And then after the last performance, we read the news and we're like, oh my God, are we going to be able to come back to
Mm.
Germany? And we
Yeah.
went through Istanbul, and we were very worried to not get on the flight to Germany, but we all made it back. So, and this was directly really one day. Yeah, I think it was the 14th of March, so almost a year ago. And then I was here in Berlin, yes, for the
Mm.
rest of it.
And did you have many projects then that were cancelled? Was it kind of a shock for you?
I mean, a shock. I mean, it was a shock, of course, on many levels. And I think at the time of the first lockdown, um I wasn't so aware of that it will actually take that much time. Again, from maybe a naive point of view, I was, oh yeah, maybe a few months, and then things will be no. I think many people actually thought that.
Mm. Yeah.
But I would have had a premiere in April last year in Graz in Austria
Mm.
of another Schubert project, the Schwanengesang, and that is postponed to next year. Um, so there's a huge gap, and I have choreographed half of it in December already, the previous year in 2019. So there is already some parts of it already choreographed, and 2022 is a big gap
Mm.
to kind of go back to that material. But yeah, that project was postponed. Then others were cancelled, like also one in Austria at the Salzburg Festival, at the Mozartwoche in January of this year, which would have been a very good and very big project for me.
Mm.
Yeah, that was cancelled. But
Yeah,
yeah,
because many artists say that, some that, oh, this was either a break or a very exciting project or something that they looked forward to for a very long time. And then, this cancellation came, and many didn't have postponements, but real just cancellations. So, yeah, that, and also, like you said, many of us thought it would be a few months or a few weeks. So, and yeah, never knew it would last this long.
yes, and it's still
Yeah.
gonna last. It's
But
yeah,
what did you do in that first lockdown to motivate yourself, or did you have something that you wanted to work on, or did you just think you'll leave it as a little break?
yes, actually, it did start off like a break, which I was also grateful for in a way. It was a forced break, but I embraced it, and I felt, oh, this is actually, I welcomed it,
Mm.
you know. But what I did in the first 2 months, I actually, because I have worked a lot with the music of Schubert, I went even more into literature about him. I went more into listening to almost now most of his chamber music. So I had a very intense relationship with Schubert and his music in the first weeks,
Oh,
which
okay.
was
Mm.
really wonderful to dive in even more because I have and will choreograph more to his music. And that then kind of consequently went into 2 new creations to music by Schubert, like two
Oh,
small
okay.
creations,
Mm.
one being a solo and one being a duet, um, where all of a sudden there was time to do it. And I booked a studio in Berlin. And that was around April, May, June when we started that. Yeah, but I did actually like the feeling of the slowdown within myself and to do different things. And I decided to start some studies, which I'm doing now intensively in arts and cultural management. So it is a good time for that, and I'm enjoying it very much.
Mm.
So yeah, I always fill the time somehow.
Mm. Yeah. But yes, I always think it gave us a bit of freedom. This, although we say it's lockdown, it's given us this freedom, like you say now, where you had the time to do all this research work and reading and so on.
Yes, and also I think, I mean, on a personal level, I think it gives, of course, there are worries, that are definitely rightful because, some people's existences are very threatened now.
Mm.
Um, but from my personal point of view, it also gave me a chance to reflect and to actually look at what I'm doing and how I do it and why. So it gave space to maybe reconnect with some of the ideas about my work and maybe question them and look at them differently. And I think in general, I mean, in the movement in arts and culture now, that is also with all the the emergencies that we have, but it's also a chance to reflect and question and maybe change certain things, which will be difficult maybe, if one looks more in a more um, perspective from cultural organizations or companies. But I think, the digital, of course, is one shape that it took, for change. But there are, of course, on other levels as well, that maybe this time allows maybe for more risk taking, maybe, or radical changes.
Mm.
But this we will find out.
Yeah, but this piece that you were talking about that you were supposed to do in April,
Mhm.
that you said it was is half choreographed. Do you think now that when you choreograph, you will do it differently because of the situation? That of all the um, experience and the thinking and the research that you've now done. Do you think that will change how you choreograph in the future as well?
I think so, because it's already kind of happening. There's sort of a transformation, and I don't know where this is going, to be honest. Which, of course, in the case of the piece that is already half done, is a little tricky because I'm not sure whether I want to re-meet this material or not. And I actually haven't looked at it ever since December 2019. So I don't know. But also the fact that probably the company will look different, there will be different people in it. There's, in my opinion, it's a long period of time in between. And yes, my ideas might change about, maybe not about the concept because I stand behind it, but maybe to the approach to the movement. But that, I still have time to think about it.
Mm. Because I wonder sometimes about this, about the creator, the choreographers and the composers, for example, because I think this, I might be wrong, but if I think of creating, then I think when you're alone, so you have your own mindset and the way you create. Whereas when it's the normal walk of life and the normal things, there are many more influences from outside that could influence, and then maybe everything starts getting the same type of pattern. But then when now, since there was an isolation, now the true artistry comes from every person because they have been isolated from influence of uh, outside, for example. Would you
Mhm.
say this would be true to think like that?
I don't know, to be honest. I'm someone anyway who responds very much to what the artists give me
Okay.
as
Mm.
people. I come with a clear concept and an idea, but then I look at the individual, which I really like, and I respond to the physicality, to their whole being. It's kind of what I'm interested in the human aspect of the artist. So, and that might change with after this time, but I'm not sure. I can't really say. Um, if it really has an impact on the approach or on the way that someone will uh, um, approach this movement
Mm,
itself.
mm. Yeah.
I think that it brings, of course, your own growth through the process, your own insights, and that will, of course, have an effect artistically and in your interpretation or maybe in your dancing. Um, but I think that's also very individual. Like
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
some
Yeah.
people will be affected more than others, you know.
Mm. Because I hear sometimes from some composers, for example, who relish this time because they were alone and they could have their own time and they could compose. And then on the other side, also composers who loves this buzz and this activity and people around them. They create from that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it seems to be like choreographers as well, that that it's the personality. It's maybe some people are just like that they are more creative when they're alone and in themselves.
Yes, I think, yes, you're right. And that depends on the type of choreographer that one is. Like I always have an internal process before. So I actually, regardless of lockdowns and Corona, I always spend time with myself before I enter the studio. And then, I use the energy and the people, of course, to create this vision that I have. But I have also worked with choreographers with a completely different approach that maybe they don't have an inner process before. It starts really right there and then, so
Mm,
they're dependent on to be creative, they're dependent on the interaction from the beginning.
yeah.
Um, so I think it's a matter of how you function and what your approach is to the whole process. Mm.
So as the lockdown went on, I mean, because the phases, did you also find that in the winter, the third lockdown, that it was a bit harder than the first one mentally?
Uh, For me personally, no. I can say no
Okay.
because
Mm. Mhm.
because um, for various reasons. One being the studies that I'm doing. To be honest, it's
Mm.
because it's so intense that it fills my day basically, and I'm enjoying it. So actually, in winter, I had I spent my entire time with it, and I enjoyed it. So I cannot really say that for me personally that it was harder. Of course, I mean, there is, you want to see people at some point, and I didn't spend Christmas with the family, which was also a first time in many years that this happened, but it was also a conscious choice that I made, not only for safety, but I felt it was the right thing to do, also to reflect even more, to end the year with myself. And this is also personality driven. Like I've been always someone who liked to be with myself alone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
I actually enjoy solitude. So for me, it doesn't affect me in some sort of negative way.
Mm. Okay.
Mm.
Um, so now the question that I'm asking everybody, do you feel that artists are valued? Not necessarily financially, but do you think there's value in art and artists?
Oh, that is a big question.
Mhm.
I mean, yes. I mean, the value of art, of course. I mean, of course, I say yes because my entire life is art, and
Mm,
it's an identity. As a dancer, it creates your identity because you spend so much time, and also from when I was a child, my identity is built on art.
mm,
So it's so integral to myself that I will never question it. But of course, in these times, I mean, it has also shown that maybe in some nations it doesn't, it's not as valued. But if I look at what art can do in these times, and may it be over digital access or all these online streamings, that we bring art to people now, I say yes, it's valuable because
mm.
you know, people have access to it and they can enjoy it in a different form. You know, it's never going to be a live event. It's never going to replace that in the digital, but it's one form to connect to the art. And I think if we think that art is creates the society, you know, and the society is culture, then of course it has value,
Mm.
because it, you know, we need also something to aspire to in order to stay sane, to say it like that.
Yeah, but do you think, because you hear also always the cuts, and this is not, that was even before Corona, that many cuts are always made in the arts, you know, it's always in schools and organizations, you know, when it comes to financial cuts or cuts that has to be made, it's always the arts. And then you think, if society doesn't put a value on that, you know, if society, or if the governments who make these cuts, you know, if they don't value the arts and the artists, then society also don't value that.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I mean, but this, I mean, first of all, because art is very subjective. So it's, I think, in terms of some sort of economic income, you know, it's very difficult to grasp or to know what you get. But then at the same time, I mean, especially in Europe, you know, the art scene is pretty established, and it's very clear that culture is part of the society. But I have to say, because you mentioned also, you know, if it's not taught to the people, you know, how can they develop? And then that, for me, also now in my studies, I always return to education. So if art would be very prioritized, or in a different way prioritized as it is now in education, then, you know, people would develop at an early age a natural value or a belief that the arts are part of the society, just as science or other
Exactly.
parts, you know. So, and this, I think, for me, it begins there, and then of course that needs to come from the government, so they subsidize that, they actually invest in it. And that's also, of course, something that, because I'm not a politician, but I always question, yeah, why is it still not there? I don't understand, even though
Yeah.
we know, and we, like, I mean, in Germany, there's so many theaters. So culture, art and culture are part of our life, you know. So why is it still not on the same level as other aspects?
Exactly. And I also heard, or you know, if you look at schools, for example, I heard somebody told me that for her daughter to go to gymnasium, the school, she has to go through many maths tests
Mm,
and German, maths and German, those two subjects. Then she can enter. If her marks are good, then she can enter. And that for me was so strange, because I think if that's the criteria, you know, that the schools put in German and maths, but what if this girl is extraordinary with the violin, playing the violin, or she is talented in dancing, or she's, you know, can paint or sculpt or anything like that? Wouldn't she then be a value to the school? But if the school can't put a value to that, or cannot, you know, give the opportunity for children in that aspect, if they already say to children, well, you have to be good in maths, then they send also a message out that the child believes that I am only good enough for education, or for this education of this school, if I'm good in maths.
mhm. I know, yes, that is
Mm.
a dilemma.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Agree, because yeah, I was fortunate to grow up with arts and culture, you know, and it, like I said, it's an integral part. Um, which in school it wasn't. So there was this double life, you know.
Mm.
But then I grew up in the DDR, you know, in the former East Germany. But then it was still different because we had to go and see theater performances, you know, in a forceful way. I'm not saying that that was the way to
Mm.
go, but they made us go, and then you could decide whether you liked it or not, but you were exposed to it, you know.
Mm.
And there were cultural groups, you know, I played the guitar, so I was part of that. So there were all these groups also in schools that were built on the talents that you had.
Mm.
And that was actually something that if there's the few things good to say about this time,
Yeah,
that
it was that.
the
Well,
culture was valued.
yeah, but the thing is, we are forced to do maths, and we're not all very eager to do it, but we are forced to do it, and we do it, you know. So you can say that for any subject, really. So this is really something that I would love to think that the artists who are now in the situation where they cannot perform, and the theaters are closed, and we can highlight some of these things that we could say, good, you know, in this time we thought about this, or we could highlight this, or we could at least plant a seed and say, can we go in that direction? And I think for me, I think the artists are the ones to talk about this, because you have the insight in this. You have the insight in through art, through you know, being a dancer, to see the value of it and to talk about the value of it. But yeah, so this is really why I always raise this subject, to hear what artists say about this. And also the other thing is, you grew up in a family where your parents were, your mom a dancer and your dad an opera singer. So you already had that exposure, where many children grow up never, you know, visiting a theater or not knowing. And yeah.
Exactly. And then what you also said about the school subjects, because
Mm.
school, of course, we learn, but it's also about finding, what am I good at? Is it music? Is it arts? Is it math? Is it physics? You know, it's kind of to see where are my abilities, and if certain things are not offered, then I don't have a chance to discover. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So and then that I remember, because of course, the, you know, as a child you have like subjects that you're better than others, and of course for me music and art were, I was good at that, and languages and all of this, and then math was difficult, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, but in a
My
way, and
gr-
I
mm.
I have also done outreach programs in Norway, and that was always the most interesting, because I look at dance as sort of a primal movement, is the our primal instinct of communication through movement, body language, which is universal, which will always be modern in a way, because it will always speak to us like we move every day. So dance in that respect will always stay relevant. And I also, when I did outreach programs in Norway in schools with teenagers that haven't been exposed to dance or ballet, it was very interesting, because first you broke the cliches that you know, young people have of ballet that have never seen it, and but still the cliches exist, you know. So as to come in as a male dancer, you present a different image of what they thought it would be. And then in the end of the workshop, we would always use improvisation tasks to make them move. And that was always interesting, because when they felt comfortable and they let go, they would move in ways that was just wonderful to see. And they came up with creative movements. I think they were surprised about themselves. And it's something about physicality and dance that connects people, builds sort of communities, you know. And I could just, and when it really worked, the room would just energetically become one, you know. And the people, I remember kids having like really fantastic experiences and feedback, like, I've never felt that way, and I didn't know I could do that, and all of these things, you know. And this sort of almost a liberation through
Yeah.
move. So of course, I mean, these are like little highlights every now and then, but I believe the exposure is so important, you know, to experience that, and then you can decide whether you like it or not, but you have been exposed, you have experienced it, and you can, you know, build your opinion, and you can make a conscious decision about what it is, and or the preconceptions that you might have had before, you know, to clean that up.
Yeah, but these preconceptions, that's also the thing that I think about when children are young. They don't have those preconceptions. They are conditioned it. And when you expose them from a young age to dance, it would not be for them anything other than normal,
No.
because yeah, and they would be able to appreciate it as well, you know. So I think that the appreciation comes with the education. I think the more people understand something, the more they can appreciate it.
Yeah.
You know. And there's another thing that I was also thinking about when I photographed all these artists in their windows, and I got an insight in a little bit of insight in their personal lives, and not anything personal. I'm just saying that, you know, I could see where they live, or and we talked, you know, things like that. And I was thinking if this perception of classical music, of ballet, you know, that it's very prestige, that it's very much in the theater, and that it's sort of this distance between the public and the dancer or the musician. If we can narrow that gap, and if we could know, for example, a little bit like your story, for example, for somebody who, you know, hasn't done ballet from a very young age, but had this love to do it, and hear your story, there's an inspiration, there's a, you know, hey, he did it, I can do it too, or it's possible, you know, that it's not just this, well, I don't think it'll ever be possible. So if artists start talking about this, talking about how they got there, the obstacles they've overcome, you know, then also it makes the contact for people more or better, that they could start thinking more of, these are people doing it. These are people, you know, ordinary people doing these great things.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's some like probably ingredient of demystification
Yeah.
of a ballet dancer, you know, that exactly we are just people doing, you know, decided to make this our profession out of passion, or, you know, whatever reasons people have to become ballet dancers. But yes, I mean, it's we are human beings, and, you know, it's like other lives too, you know, you go up and down, and it's not always wonderful, you know.
Yeah.
And the difficulties, and but I agree that to share stories is always helpful, because there will always be at least one person connecting to your story and being encouraged by it in one way or another. So I agree that that is important also to break these barriers and connect a little bit more maybe to the audience. But this movement, I mean, it is already happening, you know, that you know, now the audience is also, it's many theaters companies, they are focused on the audiences. How do we get them, you know, uh, what do we want to show to them, what message do we want to send out? So there is already more participation also through the digital, you know, people become more part of arts and culture and the production of it. So I think it's already going in that direction. And then all the social media channels, you know, you can have direct contact with artists. So you can actually contact people easier. You can have an
Yeah.
exchange, you know.
I'm
So
yeah, I'm thinking that you're talking about now this World Ballet Day, where they go do live streamings from all the different studios in the world. That's it, you know, that type of thing I think is very important for people to get that insight, you know, and what it's like, this day-to-day, you know, job being a dancer.
yes, absolutely. And it's yeah, the fact that it's live gives also this feeling of really being there in the moment, you know, taking part of the rehearsals, because of course there is not only with ballet, but there are certain images also portrayed maybe in films or TV series, you know, that send out a certain image about what we do. And of course, you know, most of it is fiction, and it's also based on cliches sometimes, so it can also send the wrong message to people who don't know about it, and then, you know, they get an image from there, and they think that's what it is, and, you know, I don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's always good to connect to the reality, and see who is really doing it and how they do it, you know. And yes, the World Ballet Day is one opportunity to see the real work, you know.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. But tell me, there must be something you've done over lockdown, except studying, except working on your. Did you do anything out of the normal, out of that you've always wanted to do, like cooking or baking or uh, buying chickens, like the baritone here in Vienna bought chickens? Uh,
I wouldn't, oh, that's interesting. Well, I wouldn't know where to put them. Um, I haven't, to be honest.
oh,
I
okay.
nothing out of the ordinary,
Mm.
like cooking. I mean, I've always cooked.
Oh, okay.
It's just, I think it's the way that time is used.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's the thing that I'm very aware of. The way I use time for the things that I'm doing
Mm,
is different because
mm,
I have more of it,
yeah.
and I'm more conscious about the way that I use my time.
Mm,
Maybe that's the one thing that I can mention. But in terms of activities, because of course there's also not much one can do.
mm.
There's a lot of Zoom calls, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. But it's also this thing that I don't know if you found it as well. Just simple things like going for a walk, for example, is
Mhm.
not rushed, or going to the supermarket, it's not rushed, and nothing
Yes,
is rushed. You know, it's like you're in the supermarket, and it's almost like you can stand a little bit longer or wait a little bit longer. It doesn't matter, you know, that feeling, I think.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes, and also sort of, I'm a very disciplined person, so I have a program, but within that, I'm also very flexible. So sometimes when I study, you know, I get tired and I just lie down for 10 minutes, you know,
Yeah.
like things that normally I wouldn't have time for, just to lie down, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
these kind of things, to just really listen to what do I need right now, you
Mm,
know, and just allow myself to do it. And maybe that's something that I would like to take when some sort of professional work normality comes back, that I allow myself a bit more of that.
mm,
Um, I think that's one thing that it came to my awareness that this is something that I don't want to lose.
mm. Well, I
Mm.
started taking naps, and I regret it because I never take naps, and now I've started well, since lockdown I've started taking short naps, and but now I'm quite addicted to my nap. And so that's my confession, that I didn't do anything you know, extraordinary in, except napping. Yeah.
But it's good, you know. It's good, you know,
Yeah.
when you feel
Yeah.
like you do it. Mm.
You know, I think I give the lockdown, I blame the lockdown for this bad habit that I took.
Yes.
But listen, one more question. What is your wish for when this is all over?
I mean, I wish, of course, that I mean, I personally learned something, but also in general that we take something from it. And I think what I said earlier, a little bit more risk taking, questioning, changing things, that might need change, um, to allow, to allow this risk to take, because I think we need to, this time, if it's one thing that this time is showing, that we need to change something in a way. So I wish that this so-called normality that I don't believe in, we cannot go back. It's impossible. We only can go on with everything that happened, with new thinking. So, when people say, oh, I want to go back to normal, there's no going back. So I wish that we understand that, and that we try to go further in a better way with, taking risk and maybe making some more radical decisions. May it be on a personal level or professional or on an organizational level, to not go back to comfort of,
Yeah.
this is how we've done it and this is what we want back, because this time actually tells us to not do that.
Yeah.
Or it gives an opportunity and a space to to rearrange things, to rethink.
Mm. I do think I agree with you there, and I wonder if we will be a bit more daring in that sense, that because we've gone through this, then you think, well, okay, we've managed this, and we can be a bit more daring. Nothing will happen, or no, not careless, but just like you say, risking something, doing something more than usual. So yeah, I see it like that as well. I think also I wonder, somebody mentioned this, and I haven't ever actually thought about this, but it will always be this thing. There hasn't been many things that happened in the world where everybody was involved. Like everybody has experienced a lockdown. When it was war, it's not always everybody that's involved in a war, but with this pandemic, everybody on this earth was affected by it in a way. So we will always think that when we are connected with somebody, that they have had the same experience, really.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. We are
Yeah.
all in the same boat.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But this was so lovely to talk to you. And would you mind if I share our conversation?
No, it's completely fine with me.
Okay. Because it was very insightful, and I think it's interesting, to share these things so that everybody can hear, and maybe all the positive words and positive energy will create something for the future, I believe. Yeah, but I think it's important. I think it's good that there's a platform where people can voice these things, and you artists, you have a wonderful insight in this, and everybody brings such great ideas and possible solutions, that I think it's great to share. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's wonderful to have an exchange, that's for sure.
yeah.
And the digital is possible.
I know, isn't it amazing? And what is so amazing is this whole project. I mean, I wrote to you, I've taken over 400 pictures of the artists here in Vienna, and I've run this whole project on Facebook and Instagram, and it's incredible if you think that we are actually socially so connected, and I think there's so much positive about Facebook and Instagram and social media overall, that, and especially in this time where we can connect with people like this. So, yeah, I think these are important things that if you think, if it wasn't here, how would our lives have been? Because in a way, this is connection, when you are on your own. And it's not, it's also families. I think families that can connect with each other in this way, because you hear of many artists, you know, that they are say in Vienna, but their parents are in Russia and they couldn't go and they haven't seen their parents for a year and things like that. So yeah, it's these little things that I think we can be grateful for in
Absolutely,
this time.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Pre-digital age, that situation would be much more difficult, I think.
yeah, yeah,
More difficult.
yeah. So Andreas, do you ever come to Vienna?
Um, I would love to. I mean, the last time, to be honest, I had my last show as a dancer in Vienna. Uh,
Really?
yeah, some years ago, our company in Norway, we were touring to Theater an der Wien,
Mm.
and it was, no one knew it was my last show, but I did it. I knew it because
Oh,
this was
really? Mm.
2017, and afterwards I went to choreograph and I had a lot of lined up jobs. So I took a
Mm.
leave of absence for my last dancing years and I choreographed mainly. And yeah, and it was a beautiful, I remember it was in April 2017, and it was the beautiful theater. It was a role that was created for me, a very dramatic role. Um, it was based on a play by Ibsen,
Mm.
Ghosts, and for me it was the perfect way, to end my
Mm.
career.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and no one knew it. It was really, I knew it, and that was again this sort of just, I did know that, and
Mm.
it was
Mm.
a perfect moment for me.
Yeah. I hear that a lot from dancers who say they just know. They know when it's time to stop.
Yes, because it was, of course, the circumstances of having work lined up as a choreographer, and
Mm.
and that was many years I went on both
Mm.
tracks, and then one took over, and it seemed the timing was natural, organically
Yeah.
given,
Yeah.
in some way. And I also physically, I was still on a very good level, and it felt
Mm.
like, oh, I was 38 then. It was really like a good moment.
Mm.